The massive conference room aboard the medical flagship sanctuary hummed with the quiet efficiency of 12 different species working together. Dr. Zethkri adjusted his compound eyes and clicked his mandibles softly as he reviewed the data on his holographic display. As the chief medical officer for the Vorthak Empire, he took pride in the precision of his species' medical protocols. Around the curved table, representatives from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations sat in their specially designed chairs. The crystalline beings of the hegemony sparkled under the soft lighting, their faceted bodies refracting rainbow patterns across the walls. The aquatic depths dwellers sat in their water-filled environmental suits, their tentacles gracefully moving through the blue liquid. Every species had sent their best medical minds for this quarterly review. Captain Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human section, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was different from the others, less decorative, more practical. Where other species wore elaborate medical insignia showing their academic achievements, Sarah's chest displayed only a simple combat medic patch and a few service ribbons. She had been part of these meetings for 6 months now, ever since humanity had joined the Galactic Medical Council. Dr. Zethkri stood and activated the main display. Charts and graphs filled the air above the table, showing survival rates, treatment protocols, and resource allocation statistics from medical facilities across the galaxy. Fellow colleagues, he began, his translated voice carrying the formal tone expected at such gatherings. Today we review the standardized protocols that have served our alliance well for over 3 centuries. The viability threshold remains our most important guideline for efficient medical care. The display shifted to show a simple chart that every medical student in the galaxy knew by heart. It showed the point where medical intervention should cease, when vital signs dropped below 40% of baseline and consciousness was lost. The numbers were remarkably consistent across all known species. As we can see, Dr. Zethkri continued, whether treating a Corvin, a Zephyrian, or an aquatic, the biological reality remains the same. Once a patient falls below the threshold, continued treatment becomes a waste of valuable resources that could save others who still have a chance. Dr. Pexlia, whose ethereal form seemed to glow with soft inner light, raised a translucent hand. The data supports this approach completely. My people have natural regenerative abilities, yet even we cannot recover once our life essence drops below the critical point. It is simply the way biology works. Nods and various species-specific agreement gestures rippled around the table. The crystalline ambassador's faceted head caught the light as she spoke. The hegemony's medical academies teach a maximum treatment window of 6 hours. Beyond that point, the molecular structure begins irreversible breakdown. 4 hours for my people, added the depths dweller representative, his voice bubbling through his water chamber. The neural pathways simply cannot function once the electrical patterns cease for that duration. One by one, each species confirmed their similar protocols. 6 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours for the hardy Corvin engineers, 2 hours for the delicate energy beings of the outer spiral, but all agreed on the basic principle. There was a clear line between life and death, and crossing it meant the end. Dr. Zethkri's attention turned to the human representative. Throughout the discussion, Captain Chen had remained silent, occasionally making notes on an old-fashioned paper pad instead of using the advanced holographic systems the others preferred. Captain Chen, Dr. Zethkri said, perhaps you could share humanity's protocols with us? I notice you have not yet submitted your formal medical guidelines to the Council database. Sarah looked up from her notes, her brown eyes meeting the alien doctor's compound gaze without flinching. The room fell quiet as all attention focused on the human section of the table. We don't really have a formal threshold, Sarah said simply. Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact. We keep working until they're cold. The translator systems around the room hummed for a moment, cross-referencing the phrase. Dr. Zethkri's mandibles clicked in confusion. I believe there may be a translation error. Could you clarify what you mean by cold? Sarah set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Body temperature drops to match the environment. No electrical activity in the brain. No cellular metabolism. Cold. Dead. Until then, we keep trying. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Dr. Pexilia's glow flickered with what her species displayed when confused. But surely you must have some limit. Some point where you recognize that further intervention is futile? If they're breathing, it's not over yet, Sarah replied. Even if it's just one breath every few minutes. Even if their heart stops. Even if they're unconscious. As long as there's any sign of life, we keep working. The crystalline ambassador's form shifted colors, indicating distress. That seems inefficient. How do you allocate resources? How do you decide who to treat first? We treat everyone, Sarah said. We don't give up on people. Dr. Zethkri felt his medical training rebelling against the concept. But Captain Chen, surely you understand the mathematics involved. If you spend 8 hours trying to save one patient who has a minimal chance of survival, you could use those same resources to save 4 patients with better odds. Sarah's expression didn't change. Maybe. But we don't know which patient will make it until we try. I've seen people with 90% burns walk out of hospitals. I've seen soldiers with massive head trauma go back to active duty. And I've seen perfectly healthy people die from minor injuries because something unexpected went wrong. The room buzzed with quiet conversations as the various species processed this information. The concept seemed to challenge everything they thought they knew about medical science. Before anyone could respond, the emergency alert system activated. Red lights bathed the conference room as an urgent message appeared on the main display. A distress signal was coming from the Outer Rim territories. A joint scientific expedition had encountered hostile forces. The automated voice of the ship's computer filled the room. Priority 1 medical emergency. Joint expedition under attack. Multiple species casualties reported. Immediate medical response required. Dr. Zethkri immediately shifted into emergency mode. All medical departments prepare for departure. We need our fastest response teams ready within 30 minutes. Around the table, representatives began contacting their medical ships and personnel. The crystalline hegemony had their surgical specialists. The depths dwellers had their trauma experts. The Corvin Empire offered their battlefield medics. Sarah stood and walked to the communications panel. This is Captain Chen to Medical Transport 7. Prep the emergency bay and get Rodriguez, Kim, and Patterson suited up. Full field hospital deployment. Dr. Zethkri looked at her with surprise. Captain, you are welcome to observe our medical procedures. But this is a critical situation requiring proven protocols. Sarah turned back to face the room, and for the first time since the meetings began, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that battlefield medics got when they heard the word impossible. Doctor, she said, you're about to see exactly what human medical protocols look like in action, and I think you're going to be very surprised. As the medical fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, none of the alien representatives could have imagined that they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of life, death, and the stubborn refusal of humans to accept either as final. The hyperspace jump ended with the familiar shimmer of reality reasserting itself. Through the viewports of the medical flagship, the scene that greeted them was chaos. 3 scientific vessels hung broken in space around a small frozen moon. Their hulls were torn open like metal flowers, atmosphere and debris still drifting from the wounds. Emergency beacons flashed desperately against the starfield. Dr. Zethkri moved through the command center with practiced efficiency, his forearms working multiple control panels simultaneously. Sensor readings indicate survivors on the moon's surface, scattered across approximately 50 square kilometers. Life signs are concerning. The main display showed the scan results. Red dots indicated casualties, too many red dots. Some were moving, some were still, and some were flickering between life and death. The automated medical analysis system was already sorting them into categories. 47 survivors detected, announced the ship's medical computer. Preliminary triage classification. 18 minor injuries, 12 serious but treatable, 17 critical with poor prognosis. Dr. Pexlia's ethereal form dimmed with sadness. 17 critical cases. At least we can focus our efforts on the 30 who have realistic chances of survival. The medical teams deployed quickly to the moon's surface. The atmosphere was thin but breathable, and the temperature hovered just above freezing. Perfect conditions for preserving bodies, Dr. Zethkri noted grimly, but terrible for keeping injured beings alive. The alien medical teams worked with impressive coordination. The crystalline surgeons set up their molecular repair stations. The depths dwellers activated their bioregeneration tanks. The Corvin engineers began stabilizing the wounded with their advanced trauma protocols. Each team had clear procedures, established through centuries of medical evolution. Dr. Zethkri watched the human team deploy and immediately noticed something strange. While the other medical teams were setting up in the main survivor camp, the humans had split up. Half went to the established medical area, but the other half headed toward a collection of bodies that the medical scanners had already classified as deceased. Captain Chen was kneeling beside a Corvan engineer, whose body was burned over 90% of its surface. The being's thick rocky skin was cracked and blackened, and no life signs registered on any scanner. Dr. Zethkri approached, his medical curiosity overriding his revulsion at the waste of resources. "Captain Chen," he said gently, "this being has been dead for at least 37 minutes. Our scans show no brain activity, no cardiovascular function, no cellular metabolism. Perhaps your efforts would be better used on the living." Without looking up from her work, Sarah pressed her hands against the Corvan's chest and began rhythmic compressions. "Rodriguez, get the defibrillator ready. Kim, I need that warming blanket now." Rodriguez, a human medic with quick hands and tired eyes, activated a strange device that Dr. Zethkri didn't recognize. "Charging to 200 joules, Captain." Dr. Zethkri's mandibles clicked in agitation. "What are you doing?" "This being has been without oxygen for over half an hour. Brain death has certainly occurred." "Has it?" Sarah asked, not stopping her compressions. She nodded to Rodriguez, who placed 2 metal paddles against the Corvan's chest. "The brain cells can survive up to 6 minutes without oxygen under normal conditions, but cold can extend that. This moon's ambient temperature bought us time." The device activated with a sharp crack of electricity. The Corvan's body convulsed once, then lay still. Sarah immediately resumed chest compressions. "Besides," Rodriguez added as he recharged the device, "look at his chest. See that slight movement every 30 seconds? That's agonal breathing. His brainstem is still trying to function." Dr. Zethkri looked closer and saw what the human had noticed. Barely perceptible movements of the Corvan's respiratory chambers. Movements so slight that the advanced medical scanners had dismissed them as muscular contractions after death. "Clear," Rodriguez called out again. Another jolt of electricity. This time, Dr. Zethkri's sensitive hearing caught something impossible. A faint rhythm starting in the Corvan's chest. Sarah continued working, injecting something directly into the being's cardiac chamber. "Come on, big guy. You're tougher than this. Corvan engineers don't quit, and neither do we." Minutes passed. Dr. Zethkri found himself holding his breath, which was ridiculous since his species didn't actually need to breathe continuously. Around them, the other medical teams worked efficiently on their patients, the ones who had realistic chances of survival. Suddenly, the Corvan's eyes opened. Not the cloudy, unfocused gaze of a dying being, but clear, aware eyes that looked around with confusion and pain. Dr. Zethkri stumbled backward, his compound eyes widening in shock. "Hey there," Sarah said softly to the injured engineer. "You're safe now. We're going to get you fixed up." The Corvan tried to speak, his voice a rough whisper. The others. "The attack came so fast and we're getting everyone," Sarah assured him. "Rodriguez, get him on the warming unit and start fluid replacement. Kim will handle the burn treatment." Dr. Zethkri watched in amazement as the human team worked with calm efficiency to treat someone who, by every standard of galactic medicine, should have been dead. His worldview, built on centuries of medical training and thousands of years of scientific advancement, suddenly felt very small. Across the rescue site, similar scenes were playing out. Dr. Patterson, another human medic, was working on a Zephyrian whose crystalline structure was shattered beyond what any textbook said was survivable. The being's internal light had gone out completely, yet Patterson was carefully injecting something into the crystal matrix while maintaining a steady rhythm of electrical stimulation. "This is impossible," Dr. Pexilia whispered, her ethereal form flickering with confusion. "That Zephyrian has been without neural activity for over an hour. The crystal lattice that houses their consciousness has been 70% destroyed." Dr. Kim looked up from her work. 70% damaged, sure. But that means 30% is still intact. "And see this pattern here?" She pointed to faint lines of light, deep within the crystal structure. "His core consciousness is still there, just very, very quiet. We're not trying to rebuild everything at once. We're just trying to stabilize what's left and give his natural regeneration a chance to work." As if responding to her words, thin threads of light began to pulse within the crystal. Slowly, barely visible, but definitely there. Dr. Zethkri moved from one impossible scene to another. A depths dweller whose water-filled body sac had been completely drained was somehow showing signs of neural activity after the humans had introduced some kind of synthetic fluid. An energy being whose form had dissipated was beginning to coalesce, again after human medics had created some kind of electromagnetic containment field. But the most shocking sight was Dr. Rodriguez working on Commander Voltar, a respected hegemony officer. Voltar had been found in the wreckage of his ship's bridge, exposed to vacuum for over an hour. His body temperature had dropped to nearly freezing. His cellular structure showed ice crystal formation, and he had no detectable heartbeat. "This being has been dead for at least 40 minutes, Dr. Zethkri said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Rodriguez was injecting something into Voltar's central circulation system while maintaining artificial circulation manually. When we brought him inside, I saw small puffs of vapor coming from his respiratory slits. Could have been residual moisture, but maybe not. His species evolved on a cold planet. Maybe they have adaptations we don't know about." Dr. Zethkri watched as the human medic worked with determination that bordered on obsession. Every few minutes, Rodriguez would check for any sign of response, then continue his efforts. The alien medical teams had finished treating their patients and were beginning to pack up, but the humans showed no signs of stopping. "Captain Chen," Dr. Zethkri said finally, "your methods are remarkable, but surely there must be some limit to what even humans consider possible." Sarah looked up from where she was monitoring the Corvin engineer, who was now conscious and talking quietly with his rescuers. Her expression was serious but not grim. "Doctor," she said, "in human medicine, we have a saying, it's not over until it's over. And as long as there's any biological activity, any sign that the body is still fighting, then it's not over. We don't stop because it's hard. We don't stop because it's unlikely. We stop when there's absolutely nothing left to work with." She gestured toward Commander Voltar. "That man has been a military officer for 30 years. He's survived battles, accidents, and the kind of stress that would kill most beings. His body knows how to fight. Our job isn't to give up on him. Our job is to give him every possible chance to do what he does best: survive." As the rescue operation continued into the night cycle, Dr. Zethkri began to understand that he wasn't just witnessing a different medical technique. He was seeing an entirely different philosophy about life, death, and the space between them. 16 hours had passed since the rescue operation began. The alien medical teams had completed their work with their usual efficiency, treating 34 survivors and preparing them for transport to proper medical facilities. Their patients were stable, their equipment was packed, and their ships were ready for departure. The humans were still working. Dr. Zethkri had sent his own medical teams back to the ships hours ago, but he remained on the moon's surface, fascinated by what he was witnessing. The humans had set up what Captain Chen called a field hospital, around 7 beings that every other medical team had classified as deceased. The Corvin engineer was now sitting up and helping other patients, his burned skin already showing signs of remarkable healing. The Zephyrian's crystal structure was slowly rebuilding itself, threads of light growing stronger by the hour. But 5 others remained in critical condition, hovering in the space between life and death that only human medicine seemed willing to explore. Dr. Pexilia had also stayed behind, her ethereal form pulsing with curiosity and something that might have been admiration. She floated beside Dr. Kim, who was working on a member of Pexilia's own species, a being whose inner light had been extinguished for over 12 hours. "In our medical academies," Dr. Pexilia said softly, "we learn that once our life essence dims beyond a certain point, restoration is impossible. The energy patterns that define our consciousness simply cannot be rekindled." Dr. Kim looked up from her work, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold air. She was using a device that generated complex electromagnetic pulses, trying to coax some response from the dormant energy being. "Your people naturally regenerate energy, right? That means the capacity for life is still there, even when it's not active." She adjusted the frequency of her device. "Think of it like a fire that's gone down to just embers. To most people it looks dead, but if you're patient and you know what you're doing, you can blow on those embers and get flames again." As if summoned by her words, a faint flicker appeared in the center of the energy being's form. Dr. Pexilia gasped, her own light pulsing with excitement. I see it, she whispered. But how did you know it was possible? I didn't, Dr. Kim admitted, continuing her careful work. But I know that your species has been around for millions of years. You wouldn't have survived that long if you were easy to kill. So even when everything looks hopeless, I figure there's probably something inside still fighting. Across the field hospital, Dr. Rodriguez was working on Commander Voltar with the same stubborn determination he had shown for hours. The hegemony officer remained unconscious, his body temperature slowly rising but still far below normal levels. His vital signs were barely detectable, existing in the thin margin between life and death. Dr. Zethkri approached, his medical training warring with what he was observing. Dr. Rodriguez, it has been 18 hours. Your patient shows minimal brain activity, damaged cellular structure, and compromised organ function. In that time, our medical teams could have treated dozens of other patients. Rodriguez didn't look up from his monitoring equipment. Maybe so, Doc, but I didn't become a medic to make efficient choices. I became a medic to save lives. He adjusted an IV drip, adding another medication to the complex mixture, keeping Voltar's body functioning. See this readout here? His brainstem is still firing occasional signals. They're weak, they're irregular, but they're there. That means he's still in there somewhere, still fighting. Dr. Zethkri studied the display. The signals were so faint that most medical equipment would have dismissed them as background noise. Only the human's specialized monitoring systems even registered them as potentially significant. But the resource expenditure, Dr. Zethkri insisted. The time, the equipment, the medications, by any reasonable calculation, the probability of success does not justify the investment. Rodriguez finally looked up, his eyes tired, but determined. You know what, Doc? You're probably right about the math. But here's the thing about humans, we're not always reasonable. Sometimes we're stubborn. Sometimes we refuse to give up even when logic says we should. He gestured toward Voltar's still form. This man served his people for 30 years. He probably saved hundreds of lives during his career. He deserves someone to be just as stubborn about saving his life as he was about saving others. As if responding to his words, Voltar's eyes suddenly opened. Not the cloudy gaze of someone barely conscious, but clear, aware eyes that focused immediately on Rodriguez's face. Where? Voltar's voice was weak, but coherent. Where am I? Rodriguez smiled, the expression transforming his tired features. You're safe, Commander. You're on the moon where your expedition was attacked. We've been taking care of you. Voltar tried to sit up and Rodriguez gently helped him. The others, my crew? Most of them are fine. We got to them in time. You were... Rodriguez paused, choosing his words carefully. You were hurt pretty badly. But you're going to be okay. Dr. Zethkri stared in amazement. According to every medical text he had ever studied, Voltar should have been dead hours ago. The revival was not just unlikely. It should have been impossible. Around the field hospital, other impossible things were happening. The energy being that Dr. Kim had been working on was slowly regaining luminosity, its form becoming more solid and defined. Another patient, an aquatic whose life support systems had failed, was beginning to show regular gill movements after hours of human intervention. Captain Chen moved between her patients like a conductor directing an orchestra, coordinating treatments and monitoring progress. She had been awake for over 20 hours, but her focus never wavered. Captain, Dr. Zethkri said, approaching her station, I must ask, how do you know when to stop? If you refuse to give up until biological activity ceases entirely, how do you determine when that point has been reached? Sarah looked up from her charts, considering the question seriously. That's a good question, Doctor. The truth is, we keep learning new things about what the body can survive. Every year, someone somewhere survives something that medical textbooks say should be fatal. She gestured toward Voltar, who was now sitting up and talking with Rodriguez. 100 years ago, human doctors would have declared him dead after 10 minutes without a heartbeat. 50 years ago, they would have given up after 30 minutes. We keep pushing those boundaries because we keep discovering that life is more resilient than we thought. Dr. Pexelia floated over to join the conversation, her energy form bright with excitement. The being of my species that Dr. Kim treated, I have sent word to our medical council. They are demanding to know how this is possible. Our entire understanding of our own biology may need to be revised. Sarah nodded.
That happens a lot when different species start sharing medical knowledge.
We're all constantly surprised by what others can survive. She checked her chronometer. We're coming up on the 24-hour mark. That's usually when we call it, if we're going to call it. Not because it's impossible to go longer, but because that's when we're reasonably certain that even if we succeed, the patient won't have meaningful recovery. Dr. Zethkri felt his worldview shifting with each revelation. 24 hours? You have continued treatment for 24 full hours on patients that our medical doctrine would have abandoned after minutes? Sometimes longer, Sarah admitted. I once worked on a human soldier for 36 hours. He'd been buried in a collapsed building for 12 hours before we even found him. Took us another day and a half to get him stable enough for transport. She smiled at the memory. He sent me a letter last year. He's married now, has 2 kids, teaches engineering at a university. His students have no idea that their professor was technically dead for most of 2 days. The 22nd hour passed, then the 23rd. One by one, 6 of the 7 hopeless cases had regained consciousness, defying every principle of conventional galactic medicine. The 7th patient, a young aquatic scientist, remained unresponsive as the 24th hour approached. Dr. Kim had been working on the aquatic constantly, trying different combinations of treatments, but nothing seemed to help. The being's gills moved occasionally but showed no regular pattern. Brain activity was minimal, bordering on non-existent. Captain, Dr. Kim said quietly, I think it might be time. Sarah approached the patient, studying the monitor readings with the kind of attention that comes from years of making life and death decisions. The other medical personnel gathered around, understanding that they were witnessing a moment of profound significance. His nervous system is different from the others, Sarah said finally. Aquatic neural patterns are more complex, more distributed. Brain death doesn't happen the same way. She looked at Dr. Zethkri and Dr. Pexlia. This is why we need each other. Human stubbornness can push the boundaries of what's possible, but we still need to understand the specific biology we're working with. As the 24th hour arrived, Sarah began the process of ending treatment. It was the first time Dr. Zethkri had seen the humans accept defeat, and somehow that made their previous victories even more remarkable. But as they began to shut down the life support systems, something caught Dr. Zethkri's attention, a subtle change in the aquatic's gill movement that the humans had missed. Wait, Dr. Zethkri called out, his voice sharp with sudden urgency. The humans paused in their shutdown procedure, hands frozen over control panels. Captain Chen looked up from the aquatic patient, her expression questioning. Doctor? Dr. Zethkri moved closer to examine the young scientist's gill movements. His compound eyes were designed to detect subtle patterns that other species might miss, and something about the rhythm had changed in the last few minutes. I believe, he said carefully, that this being is not dying. I believe he is transforming. Dr. Kim frowned, her hand still hovering over the life support controls. Transforming? What do you mean? The aquatic species has a defensive mechanism, Dr. Zethkri explained, his excitement growing as he recognized the pattern. When faced with extreme trauma, their nervous system can enter a state called deep current. It appears identical to death, but it is actually a form of hibernation that can last for days. Sarah moved to stand beside him, studying the patient with new eyes. How can you tell the difference? The gill movement pattern. See how it has changed from random spasms to this slower, more regular rhythm? This is not the breathing of a dying being. This is the specialized respiratory cycle of deep current. Dr. Pexilia's ethereal form pulsed with fascination. I have heard of this state, but I thought it was just theoretical. It is extremely rare, Dr. Zethkri admitted. I have only seen it described in ancient medical texts, but the pattern is unmistakable once you know what to look for. Working together, the human medical team and Dr. Zethkri adjusted their treatment approach. Instead of trying to force the aquatic back to normal consciousness, they began supporting the hibernation state while monitoring for signs of natural awakening. 3 hours later, the young scientist's eyes opened. His first words were a confused question about the time, as if he had simply been sleeping through a normal rest period. He had no memory of his injuries or the rescue operation. Dr. Zethkri felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of medicine. For centuries, his species had prided themselves on their scientific precision and logical approach to treatment. But watching the humans work had shown him that logic without persistence was incomplete, just as persistence without knowledge could be dangerous. As the rescue operation finally concluded, 36 hours after it had begun, every single survivor had been saved. The alien medical teams had saved 34 using established protocols. The humans had saved 7 more using methods that shouldn't have worked. And in the end, it had taken the combination of human determination and alien expertise to save the final patient. The journey back to the medical flagship was quiet. The rescued patients were stable and comfortable, many of them still marveling at their own survival. Commander Voltar spent much of the trip talking with Rodriguez, trying to understand what had happened to him. "You were clinically dead for over an hour," Rodriguez explained. "No heartbeat, no breathing, body temperature dropped to dangerous levels. By conventional standards, there was no chance of recovery." Voltar shook his head in amazement. "But you continued treatment anyway, why?" Rodriguez considered the question seriously. "Because giving up is easy. Anyone can look at a difficult situation and decide it's hopeless. But hope, real hope, that takes work. It takes refusing to accept defeat even when defeat seems certain." In the medical bay, Dr. Zethkri was having his own revelation. He had spent his entire career believing that medicine was about applying proven treatments to clear diagnoses. The humans had shown him that sometimes medicine was about refusing to accept the limits of what was proven. Dr. Pexilia approached him, her energy form dim with exhaustion but bright with excitement. "Dr. Zethkri, I have been thinking about what we witnessed. The humans did not simply use different techniques. They used a different philosophy entirely." "Yes," he agreed. "They treat medicine not as a science of limitations but as a science of possibilities. And yet," Dr. Pexilia continued, "they still needed our knowledge to save the final patient. Perhaps the most effective approach combines their persistence with our understanding." Dr. Zethkri's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "A hybrid approach. Human determination guided by species-specific expertise." Captain Chen joined their conversation, looking tired but satisfied. "That's exactly what we were hoping for when humanity joined the Medical Council. We knew we had different methods, but we also knew we had a lot to learn from species who had been practicing medicine for thousands of years longer than us." She gestured toward the recovered patients. "Today proved that we're all stronger when we work together. Your knowledge of aquatic biology saved that young scientist's life. Our refusal to give up saved the others. Neither approach alone would have saved everyone." Dr. Zethkri felt a profound sense of possibility opening before him. "Captain Chen, I would like to propose a joint research project. My medical team working with yours to develop new protocols that combine human persistence with species-specific expertise." Sarah's face lit up with interest. "I think that's a brilliant idea, Doctor. We could probably save a lot more people if we pooled our knowledge and our approaches." As the medical fleet approached the main space station, word of the rescue operation had already spread. Medical facilities across the galaxy were requesting reports, wanting to understand how 37 beings had been saved from what should have been a disaster with only minimal survivors. Commander Voltar, now fully recovered, stood at the observation deck watching the stars pass by. Dr. Rodriguez found him there, both men looking out at the vast expanse of space. "Dr. Rodriguez," Voltar said quietly, "I want you to know that what you did, what all the humans did, it will not be forgotten. You have changed how my people think about medicine, about life, about the meaning of hope." Rodriguez nodded, accepting the gratitude with the quiet dignity of someone who had simply done his job. "Commander, in human culture we have a saying. It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up. Today, we just helped some good people get back up." The medical flagship docked at the space station to find crowds of reporters, medical officials, and family members of the rescued scientists waiting for them. The story of the impossible rescue was already becoming legend across the galaxy. But for Dr. Zethkri, the real significance was quieter and more profound. As he watched the human medical team prepare their reports, he realized that they had given him something more valuable than new techniques or technologies. They had given him a new way of thinking about the fundamental purpose of medicine. Medical science, he now understood, was not just about treating disease and injury efficiently. It was about refusing to accept that anyone was beyond help. It was about fighting for every life with the same determination that the patients themselves fought to survive. 3 months later, Dr. Zethkri stood before the Galactic Medical Council once again. But this time, he was not presenting the standard protocols that had governed medical care for centuries. This time he was proposing something revolutionary, Fellow colleagues, he began, his translated voice carrying new conviction. I stand before you today to propose a fundamental revision of our medical protocols. Based on recent field experience working with human medical teams, I believe we have been too quick to accept the limitations of what we consider possible. The room buzzed with interested conversation. The story of the impossible rescue had reached every corner of the galaxy, and many species were eager to understand how their own medical practices might be improved. The humans have taught us that death is not a moment, but a process, and that process can often be reversed with sufficient determination and proper technique. I propose that we adopt new protocols that extend treatment windows, encourage species cooperation, and refuse to abandon patients while any biological activity remains. Dr. Pexelia's form brightened with enthusiasm. The Ethereal Council has already begun implementing extended treatment protocols based on Dr. Kim's work with our species. The results have been remarkable. One by one, the other species representatives began sharing their own experiences. The crystalline hegemony had established new trauma centers that combined their molecular repair techniques with human-style persistence. The Corvin Empire was training their medics in the human concept of never give up. But it was Commander Voltar's presence at the meeting that carried the most weight. Still serving as a military officer, he stood as living proof that the impossible could become possible with the right approach. I am here today, he said simply, because a human medic refused to accept that I was dead. I am here because Dr. Rodriguez believed that as long as I was breathing, it was not over yet. That philosophy, that stubborn, unreasonable hope, has given me a second chance at life. The vote was unanimous. The new protocols would be implemented across the galaxy, combining human persistence with the medical expertise of every member species. The viability threshold, which had governed medical decisions for centuries, was replaced with what became known as humanity's 24-hour rule. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Zethkri reflected on how much had changed. Medical schools across the galaxy would now teach that the limits of possibility were far broader than anyone had imagined. Emergency responders would be trained to see hope where others saw only futility. But most important, 1 year after the rescue operation that changed galactic medicine, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation lounge of the new Joint Medical Research Station. Through the massive viewports, she could see ships from dozens of species docking and departing, each one carrying medical teams trained in the new protocols that had become known throughout the galaxy as humanity's 24-hour rule. The research station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human determination had merged with crystalline precision, Corvin durability, and ethereal energy manipulation to create the most advanced medical facility in known space. Every day, impossible cases arrived here, and most days the impossible became possible. Dr. Zethkri approached, his compound eyes reflecting the star field beyond the windows. In the past year, he had become one of the galaxy's leading advocates for the new medical philosophy. His joint research with human doctors had produced treatment protocols that were being implemented on thousands of worlds. Captain Chen, he said, his translated voice warm with friendship that had grown from mutual respect, I have received the final reports from the Galactic Medical Survey. The results are quite remarkable. Sarah turned from the viewport, interested. The survey had been tracking medical outcomes across member worlds since the new protocols were implemented. Good news, I hope. Better than good, Dr. Zethkri replied, activating a holographic display that showed statistics from across the galaxy. Survival rates for critical patients have improved by an average of 37%. Perhaps more importantly, the definition of critical has expanded significantly. Cases that would have been considered hopeless a year ago are now treated as challenging but possible. The display shifted to show specific examples. On Corvin mining worlds, accident victims were surviving injuries that would have been instantly fatal under the old protocols. Crystalline medical centers were successfully treating structural damage that had been considered irreparable. Ethereal hospitals were regularly reviving patients whose life essence had been extinguished for hours. But the most significant change, Dr. Zethkri continued, is not in the statistics. It is in the attitude of medical personnel across the galaxy. Where once we sought to efficiently manage death, we now aggressively pursue life. Dr. Pexlia materialized beside them, her ethereal form bright with enthusiasm.
She had become the liaison between the Ethereal Council and the joint research teams,
helping to develop new understanding of consciousness and life energy that had revolutionized treatment for several species. "Dr. Chen," she said, "I bring greetings from the Council and news of our latest breakthrough. Working with Dr. Kim's team, we have successfully revived beings who had been in energy stasis for over a week. The implications for long-term medical storage and treatment are extraordinary." Sarah smiled, remembering Dr. Kim's patient work with the first ethereal patient they had saved. That single success had opened up entirely new fields of medical research. "Dr. Kim will be thrilled. She's been working on expanding the time windows for every species we treat." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the station's communication system. Sarah's personal communicator activated, displaying an emergency message that made her heart race. "Medical emergency, Sector 7, she read aloud. "Multiple species casualties. Extreme conditions. Requesting immediate deployment of advanced rescue teams." Dr. Zethkree's mandibles clicked with anticipation rather than concern. A year ago, such a message would have filled him with dread at the inevitable loss of life. Now it represented a challenge to be met with every tool at their disposal. "Shall we respond, Captain?" he asked. "Absolutely," Sarah replied, already heading toward the emergency bay. "Dr. Pexlia, can you contact Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Kim? Tell them we have a full deployment." 20 minutes later, the fastest medical response ship in the galaxy was jumping toward Sector 7. The ship itself embodied the new philosophy. It was equipped not just to treat the wounded, but to attempt the impossible. Advanced life support systems could maintain biological function for days. Specialized equipment allowed for species-specific treatments that had never been attempted before. The emergency briefing took place during the hyperspace jump. The situation was grim. A passenger transport carrying representatives from 8 different species had suffered catastrophic system failures in deep space. They had been drifting for over 18 hours before being discovered, and many of the casualties had been exposed to vacuum or extreme cold for extended periods. Under the old protocols, Dr. Zethkree noted, reviewing the preliminary data, we would expect to save perhaps a dozen of the 43 beings aboard. The rest would be classified as beyond help before we even arrived. Dr. Rodriguez, now senior trauma specialist for the joint medical teams, studied the casualty reports with the same careful attention he had given to Commander Voltar a year earlier. 18 hours is a long time, but it's not impossible. We've learned a lot about what different species can survive under extreme conditions. Dr. Kim nodded, already planning treatment strategies. The key will be species-specific approaches. What kills a corvin quickly might be survivable for an aquatic. What's impossible for a crystalline being might be routine for an ethereal. When they arrived at the disaster site, the scene was as bad as the reports had suggested. The passenger transport was a frozen hulk drifting in space. Its life support systems completely failed. Emergency beacons indicated survivors, but the readings were weak and irregular. The rescue operation that followed became legendary in medical circles, not for its drama, but for its methodical application of the new philosophy. Every casualty was treated as potentially survivable. No one was written off. No one was abandoned. Dr. Zethkree found himself working on a Corvin engineer who had been without life support for nearly 20 hours. The being's rock-hard skin was frost-covered, his internal temperature far below survivable levels, but his thermal chambers still showed faint activity, and that was enough. If they're breathing, it's not over yet, he muttered to himself, unconsciously echoing the words that had become the unofficial motto of galactic medicine. He began the slow process of warming and resuscitation, drawing on techniques that combined traditional Vorthak medical knowledge with human persistence protocols. Across the rescue ship, similar scenes played out. Dr. Pexilia worked with Dr. Kim to revive 3 ethereal beings, whose energy forms had been scattered by the transport's power failures. Dr. Rodriguez led a team treating aquatic passengers whose life support tanks had failed. Using artificial fluids and controlled rehydration techniques, Captain Chen moved between treatment stations, coordinating care and making the hard decisions about resource allocation. But even those decisions had changed. Instead of choosing who to save, she was choosing who to treat first, confident that with enough time and effort everyone could be saved. 36 hours later, as the last patient was stabilized and transferred to a proper medical facility, the final count was remarkable. 43 casualties, 43 survivors. Some would need extensive recovery time, and a few would bear permanent effects from their ordeal. But all would live. Commander Voltar, who had volunteered to observe the rescue operation, shook his head in amazement. A year ago, this would have been considered a miracle. Today, it is simply excellent medical care. The journey back to the research station was quiet, but it was the comfortable quiet of a job well done. In the medical bay, the rescued passengers were being cared for by a team that included members of every major species in the galaxy. The cooperation that had begun with that first rescue operation had grown into something beautiful and powerful. Dr. Zethkri found Captain Chen in the observation lounge again, looking out at the stars with the satisfaction of someone who had seen the impossible become routine. "Captain," he said, "I have been thinking about what we have accomplished this past year. We have not simply changed medical protocols. We have changed what it means to be alive in this galaxy." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "When I first told the medical council that humans don't give up while someone is still breathing, I'm not sure I realized how literally that would be taken, or how far it would spread. The philosophy has taken root in ways none of us expected," Dr. Zethkri agreed. "Mining operations now maintain medical teams trained in extreme survival protocols. Military units carry equipment designed for extended resuscitation efforts. Even civilian emergency services have adopted the 24-hour rule." Dr. Pexlia joined them, her form glowing with contentment. "I received a message from the Ethereal Council today. They are establishing a new award for medical personnel, the Chen Award for those who refuse to accept the impossible." Sarah laughed, embarrassed by the honor. "That's really not necessary. We were just doing our job." "No," Dr. Zethkri said seriously. "You were redefining what the job could be. You showed us that the limits we accepted were not limits at all, but simply points where we had stopped trying." The communication system chimed again, and a message appeared on the main display. It was from Commander Voltar, sent from his new command, a rescue vessel designed specifically for impossible situations.